A warning ahead that this video may contain spoilers for the following films, and some scenes of violence that viewers may find upsetting. I'm just going to come out and say it, Greta Gerwig's Little Women is an absolute train wreck of a film. Not only is it surprisingly bland, but its attempts at emotional depth or character development are derailed by Gerwig's questionable choice to turn it into a non-linear story. Little Women was never written as a linear story. There was no purpose to this. And considering that the characters never look any different, it's almost impossible to tell whether you're in this film's past or its present. In the past, Beth develops scarlet fever, but recovers in time for Christmas. In the present, Beth's condition worsens and she dies. Then right after her funeral, we go back to Meg's wedding when Beth was still alive, thus destroying any potential dramatic tension the film was going for, especially since the two scenes don't seem connected in any way, shape or form. It seems like Gerwig has picked up that some films use non-linear narratives. What she doesn't seem to understand is why those films use non-linear narratives. Even my mum, who loved the film, agreed that the story structure felt disjointed, and I'm so glad that Jojo Rabbit won the Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar instead. But of course, a non-linear narrative can enhance the story better in some films, and I'll be talking about why Pulp Fiction, Memento, and Cloud Atlas do it well. So let's start with Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is one of my all-time favourite films, boasting fantastic performances, intriguing dialogue, a great choice of music, and various moments of unpredictability. Some moments of unpredictability are even fulfilled by the film's non-linear narrative. The way Pulp Fiction is framed opens and closes in a diner. At the beginning we see Yolanda and Ringo discussing robbing the diner, and the scene ends with them executing the robbery. At the end we see Vincent and Jules talking at the same time as Ringo and Yolanda, with Vincent even making a fantastic blink and you'll miss it background appearance walking to the toilets, and the four end up in a Mexican standoff. The non-linear narrative allows us to hear the conversations of both duos. The first part of the Bonnie situation is shown after the opening credits, where Vincent and Jules drive to Brett's apartment and kill him. This closes off when they shoot him. We later return to this near the end of the film, and we hear Jules deliver Ezekiel 25:17 from the perspective of the fourth man. We didn't know this character existed from the beginning, and has proved as a surprise to the fellow audience member. Another enhancement is the use of dramatic irony. Jules believes that God came down from heaven and stopped the bullets that the fourth man fired towards him and Vincent, and this convinces him to quit. Vincent, however, disputes this, believing it to just be luck. What he doesn't know, that the viewer does, is him walking in the opposite direction to Jules' path of redemption will later lead to his death. But funnily enough, we see Vincent's death before this happens, and the non-linear narrative helps make it more surprising and shocking. In chronological order, this would have been a lot more predictable, but with the film's structure, and Vincent essentially being the protagonist of the film as a whole, this is halfway through the film, and that, combined with Vincent and Butch's long pause, makes Vincent's death even more surprising. The final note to this is the very last shot of the film, where Vincent and Jules leave the diner. The very last frame sees Vincent in shot of the window, and Jules obscured behind the window pane, representing how Vincent's death is known, but Jules' fate is completely unknown. Memento is another one of my all-time favourite films. I watched it for the first time at 13, and despite being confused and not really sure of what happened, it really intrigued me. I've rewatched it since then and begun to understand more about it, but I think one thing that makes it intriguing is its non-linear narrative structure. Memento has a very distinct structure, where the colour sequences play backwards and the black and white sequences play forwards until the two sets of sequences coincide at the end. In chronological order, the story will be less interesting, but this structure makes for a highly intriguing and complex story that you'll want to watch again. And now for the last film, Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas is by far the most underrated film I've ever seen, and one of the most ambitious pieces of filmmaking ever made. But Cloud Atlas is also a film that would require a non-linear narrative to sustain an audience's interest. Based on David Mitchell's 2004 book, Cloud Atlas follows 6 different storylines set across 5 centuries and represents the theory of reincarnation and how everything is connected. The book plays out the first half of the first 5 stories, with the 6th being uninterrupted, and the second halves of the other 5 stories playing in reverse order, so Adam Ewing's story is the first to start and the last to finish. With the film, beginning at a 6th time and halfway through, would not sustain the interest of most viewers. As a result, the Wachowskis and Tom Tykwer worked hard to structure all the stories in a very distinct way, where they could tell all 6 stories while sustaining a viewer's interest. Even the harshest critics for Cloud Atlas commended it for never being boring. Each story starts out in chronological order, but it's roughly the first 5 minutes of each story, thus giving you a rough idea of what these stories are going to be like. Ewing's story is a period drama, Frobisher's story is an LGBT drama, Ray's story is a thriller, Cavendish's story is a black comedy, Somni's story is a dystopian sci-fi, and Zachary's story is a sci-fi survival story. After the first 5 minutes of Zachary's story, the other stories are continued, and to properly absorb why the scenes bounce off each other so well, one's attention must always be fully focused. But it is worth it, and despite being nearly 3 hours long, the film is never ever boring. Compared to Little Women, which not only feels unstructured, but is also incredibly tedious most of the time. The stories in Cloud Atlas bounce off one another through character exposition, the connections between the same actors playing different characters, and even similar actions and sounds. From this, you truly grasp the film's tagline: everything is indeed connected. So there's my thoughts on how these three films do the nonlinear narrative correctly. They're all sublime films and among my 10 favourites of all time, and I'm very likely to end up talking about them in my best movies list. At the beginning we see Ringo and the shitting fuck, and the nonlinear narrative helps make it more